star prophecy was applied by Josephus to this family, their rise. That's how he got his position. Now, Christian documents, I think, go back to the native Jewish position. Yes, it's one of the Jews' own. That's who the star is. It is one of their own, but it's someone who thinks in a more cosmopolitan manner. It's someone who's not preaching revolution against Rome, accepts the Roman cultural order, has a lot of problems with his own people, and in fact likes Roman centurions, likes Roman soldiers, likes Roman tax collectors, doesn't mind people with bad sexual habits, prostitutes, is willing to keep company with sinners, and so on. And that's basically what the Gospels are presenting, a Messiah. And so, well, that's him, isn't it? Well, that's what you'll have to determine. Is that a Palestinian person? You'll have to determine. I don't personally think it is, as you see. I do think someone like Jesus existed, but I don't think that's a portrayal of him that's accurate in terms of Palestinian history. I don't know why he was executed by Rome, but I assume if he was executed in the manner that he was executed, it had to do with some kind of subversive revolutionary activity. The Romans didn't make mistakes, and they were kept very careful records, and their governors had to repress any kind of revolutionary activity that was inimical to Rome of the Spartacus variety. And they had enough trouble with Spartacus in the previous century to know what was expected of them, and that's why they crucified these people in the droves. And crucifixion was a punishment reserved for people, an exemplary punishment having to do with subversive revolutionary activity or antisocial or revolutionary activity of some kind. So you have to understand that those are the factors that I would bring into play to try to reconstruct who Jesus was. Okay, let's get on here. Chapter 5 we looked at. We talked about Judas the Galilean. Let me finish up the idea that the star for Christianity goes back to the Jewish thing, but it presents a Messiah that may not be familiar to in a Palestinian framework. It certainly isn't anything like what the scrolls were envisioning. So if the scrolls are the native messianic literature, then it's totally different from what they are. You say, yeah, that's the uniqueness of Jesus. He's totally different. Yeah, but a lot of his followers don't seem to realize that. So something is skewed somewhere, and we just don't know. I mean, finishing up, the Jesus of Scripture looks a lot like Paul wants him to look like, and yet Paul is an enemy of the early Christian church. So something is odd here, and you'd have to work that out yourself. But it's so complicated that you would not be able to explain it to someone who is not well versed in these materials. So if you try to explain it to your mother, your cousin, your brother, your aunt, your uncle, your boyfriend or girlfriend, you're really gonna run into some brick walls. And it's not an easy thing, I can assure you. But that's not why we work, to explain it to others. We work to try to increase our own understanding, so we'll try to do that. So, okay, we have Judas the Galilean. He starts the sect of the Galileans, though he's not from Galilee, he's from a Gaulanite, and you see, Josephus culls things from, Josephus culls important passages from Josephus. All right, we've got that far? So now we know that Judas the Gaulanite came from a town, he says, called Gamala. Where's Gamala? It's in the Golan Heights. It's across the Sea of Galilee, above the Sea of Galilee. Josephus writes about it. Why does he write about it? Why does Josephus write about Gamala? Well, he writes about the Roman siege of Gamala. When the Roman troops came to suppress the uprising in Palestine, they came down from the north, Lebanon, the Lebanese coast, Syrian Lebanon. And they marched down first through Galilee and then down towards Jerusalem. So Josephus claims that he was the commander in Galilee, Josephus. I don't think he was completely the commander. He may have been the commissar. Some ideological person sent up by the priest to see what was going on there. He was a representative of the priesthood in Jerusalem. And I've often told friends, if you're going to have a commander like Josephus, you don't need enemies. Because the guy was totally incompetent. He was a total coward. What he was good at was writing books, and that's basically what he ended up doing. That's what he should have done from the beginning. But somehow he saw himself as a military commander, which is preposterous. And he's responsible, he claims, for the defense of Galilee. Well, one of the cities he supposedly is helping to defend is not in Galilee, it's in the Golan, it's Gamala. The Romans invest that around 67 AD, and all the people jump off the cliffs there and commit suicide rather than surrender. So it's a real hotbed of revolutionary resistance, even in Josephus' time. The reason it's called Gamala and there are cliffs, do you know why it's called Gamala? Who can take a stab at that? What's the word in Arabic and Hebrew for camel? But in hard G, it's Gamal. It's Gamal. It looked like a camel's hump. That's why it was called Gamala. It looked like the hump of a camel, and it was enriched with, like a rock protuberance. Like the city was built on top of it, or the town, and that's why it was called Gamala. It looked like, and you can see it from down by the edge inland from the Sea of Galilee. It's around 20 miles inland in the Golan Heights from the Sea of Galilee, or 15 miles inland, and it's like a camel's hump. Anyway, so he came from there. So he was a Gaulanite. And together with a person called Sadduc, or Sadducus. You see, you could say the word Sadducee comes from Sadduc. He headed a revolt saying that it would be manifest slavery. And he asserted the people to assert their liberty. But basically he's saying that it was manifest slavery to pay taxes to Rome. So this revolution that had to do with the census that was imposed on the Jews in 6 to 7 AD is the beginning of the movement of Judas the Galilean, which Josephus calls the fourth philosophy, but never tells us what it is. He tells us about the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the Essenes that we've already had in this class somewhat, but it never tells us who the fourth philosophy is, which are, I think, pseudo-Christians, but Christians of a more violent strain, the mindset of a Judas the Galilean. Jesus' family may have been descendants of Judas the Galilean, because actually Judas the Galilean is clearly making Davidic claims of some kind. Jesus' family, as the scripture presents him, is making Davidic claims. Scripture is presenting Jesus as the star that comes out of Palestine. We're going back to the actual, so he's like the Messianic movement. As Josephus says, the people that made the war against Rome thought that the prophecy applied to one of their own. So I think that the people writing the scripture know that and are basically recasting it in terms of not a war against Rome, but a much more spiritual situation. Now, that may be the message of the teacher too. We'll have to see if his followers agree on what his message was.